Well, Bill, after 4 years of baseball, you'd called it quits. A matter of principle. You said you'd taught for a whole year and you'd enjoyed the teaching. What is the story of you going from resigning from an athletic position by a matter of principle to within a couple years being the leader of the athletic department? How did that come to be? How did you become Madison's AD?
Again, I don't understand why or how it happened. When I gave up coaching, I thought I was finished as far as any athletic involvement at Madison was concerned. I might end up somewhere else coaching someplace, but it was a year after, in 1966, the athletic director at Madison retired, and that same principal, who I had the disagreement with, we had left on good, professional terms. I didn't, it wasn't a heated thing or anything, just a disagreement in philosophy. But he came and asked me if I would consider being athletic director. I had no interest in that. I hadn't thought about it, and what I knew about it, I didn't want to do it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, if I laid down the right principles for taking the job, maybe I could help the athletic program become more of a part of the regular curriculum, more respect between coaches and faculty. Because like it or not, a lot of faculty members look upon coaches as, oh, he's just a coach. Mm-hmm. They're a separate group of people, they teach fun and games, but they aren't really, they're not academic and they're not technical educators. And so I said I would consider the job if I could be a part of every interview that involved the hiring of a coach, of a head coach. And I was surprised. He said, okay. And so I took the job with that agreement, and to his credit, he held to it. I never hired a coach in my 22 years as athletic director. But I got to sit in on every interview, and I got to ask questions of prospective coaches as to what they believed about athletics and the role of athletics in education and discipline, guardrails, and so on, how they would handle this and that situation. And you can find out a lot, and it didn't take long. I knew that the principal and the vice principal was sitting through the same interview. They would hear what I hear, and if they liked what they heard, we'd hire that coach. If they didn't, we hired somebody. They hired other coaches. They didn't hire everybody I said. But we hired enough that we had people like you and Jeff Erdman, Terry Brown, Tom Petke, Ole Johnson, Bill Fransky. We had a good core of people come in, and I felt like the connection between the athletic department and the teaching staff, and I don't like to use that term because we're all teachers, mm-hmm. But too many people don't think of coaches as teachers. I think when I talk of it, I say it's a teacher-coach. If you're just a coach, I don't want you. If you're going to be a teacher coach, I want you. For example, when we hire a coach, you're going to teach 5 classes if you're in the building, and you're going to coach with sport 2 hours after school. Are you going to be able to give those 5 classes your full attention, a professional teaching job, day by day? Or are you sitting in the classroom with scouting reports spread out and deciding what you're going to do about the next game, how you're going to attack this defense or that, while your students are doing busy work? And when we had the 50-year reunion of the baseball team at just before they closed the gym at Madison, one of the faculty members who was not involved at all in athletics, but she was a fan of athletics, she was always at our games and stuff. She came up and congratulated us, and she told me one thing the faculty at Madison always knew was that whenever an issue, a problem came up that involved the athletic department, that the coaches would do the right thing. And that really blessed me. I thought, you know, they didn't look at us any longer as, well, you're out there only worried about a championship trophy. No, they realized we wanted kids to grow up to be good citizens, to learn something. Besides, if you learn something, you're going to win the trophy. If you're not learning, those things are going to go by the wayside anyway.
Well, what's interesting when I'm hearing this answer and I'm trying to see the relationship with my experiences with you and at Madison and why I did things the way I did things, somehow or other I always knew that my job, what I really made a living doing, was teaching. That's the coaching stipend was not raising my family. The coaching stipend was for one other teaching responsibility, which was a different prep. But it never made any sense to me to shortchange what my bread and butter was, teaching, and I always just saw coaching as a teaching opportunity in the athletic realm that still took the same type of preparation and execution, respect for kids. But I guess what I'm saying is your leadership made that just like a second thought, because I learned it by watching how you taught. You weren't shortchanging any of your history classes because you were AD. You weren't. You changed hats, and we're doing two jobs, and I really appreciate that because it was an important thing to learn.
Well, it takes the leadership at the top. I was blessed to work for a lot of wonderful principals, some better than others, but most of them, it was, you know, as an athletic director, you can't get anything done if the boss doesn't cooperate.
Right.
And teacher assignments, coaching assignments, who is going to do what. Unless the principal believed in the program, we were all going to get hurt. And we were blessed that, like even the name change of Leotis McDaniel High School now, Leotis believed in athletics. Mm-hmm. He believed we were teaching. And if he could do something that would help a coach be a better coach, he would do it. If it would make you a better teacher, classroom teacher, he would do it.
Right.
And that, I think, that's what leadership at the top is all about.
Well, that, you know, I know philosophically what you believed as you started to become an athletic director. What are some of the challenges that you run into as an AD at your Madison athletic director career of keeping that vision going? And what were some of the things you maybe had to do to overcome those challenges to keep kind of the ship steering in the direction you wanted it to go? Because not many people pull it off. I mean, 40 years of athletic excellence is kind of unprecedented in my experience. And so what were some of those challenges and how'd you overcome them?
Well, I think the first big challenge was to get everybody on the same page. Mm-hmm. And when I came in, we didn't have, each sport had their own set of rules. We finally were able to establish having coaches meetings, and in those coaches meetings we decided as a group to set up a athletic code, which some people loved and some people hated, but the parents had to read it, the student and the parent both signed it, and we had it on file. Here are the guidelines that you live by if you're involved in the sport. And it was one that also told the coaches, don't go off on your own with a new, you can have your individual rules that apply to golf or tennis or baseball or what, but overall, here are the basics.
They have to be consistent with those.
They have to be consistent, and we want everyone, and it just burned me when I'd hear a coach talking to his athlete who was in trouble and tell him, it's the athletic director's rule. No, if it was my rule, it's a way of passing it off. If the coach didn't believe it as being a good teaching tool, we shouldn't be doing it. It should be, all of us should be in there, no, this is my rule. If you don't like it, you're gonna have to deal with me.
Right.
And not to pass it off to, well, it's the AD. And I think it carries more weight when all of us, and we had, you were there, and you've been in we had a unified group.
Right.
There were, once in a while, there was a maverick who went off, but that maverick left in a hurry. They didn't stay long because they realized, hey, I'm at odds with the whole program, and that's fine if they want. But I think that athletic code, ours was good enough that the district, when I went to the district's office, the district adopted it, not word for word, but they adapted it. And now the district had the same thing where everybody had to sign it. So it was going, but the argument was, it's not fair. Jefferson has this rule, they have this rule, they're not gonna suspend him, you're gonna suspend him. And I say, so what if another school doesn't enforce the rule? Are you doing the right thing for your kids that you have contact with? If it's good for your kids, do it. If the other guy's cutting corners and letting them off, his kids are gonna stand in the unemployment line, not yours.
It's definitely a challenge. Are there some other examples or stories that kind of help explain how you got literally all the coaches on the same page?
Well, I don't know as we, one thing we did have, with the athletes and with the coaches, we had a fellowship of Christian athletes, I think went a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a requirement. Nobody had to do anything. And we weren't there trying to recruit people for this church or that theology. But here are the 10 Commandments, here are the guidelines. Now, thou shalt not steal. What are the ways that people steal? As a coach, do you steal? As a player? Are you stealing from your teammates when you are out too late the night before the game? Are you stealing from them when you're drinking on the weekend? As a coach, are you stealing from your classes when you're looking over scouting reports instead of teaching history?
Mm-hmm.
That's all thievery in my estimation. It's not taking money out of the till, but you're robbing them of their opportunity for an education that you're being paid to give them.
Well, somewhere in the culture, I got that not only as a player, because I was a player with those guidelines in place, and I also then coached with those guidelines in place. And coming out of that, I realized that you kind of got to make a decision as a kid. And are you gonna care about the way you affect others, or are you gonna live life like the world rotates around you? And that's kind of the great divide. And Madison always affected, through athletics, I believe, make the right choice there and think about the benefits of being a good teammate, making your teammates better. And as soon as you discover how important that is, one, it's the key to successful teams, but it's also the key to success in life. And if you want to choose to continue to live in this deluded way that the world rotates around you, and here's Bill Wiitala, who ruined my life because I was making all sorts of bad decisions and hurting my grades and my teammates and anything, and that didn't work. We have the freedom to make that choice. But boy, providing motivation for kids in sports to do the right thing, the byproduct of that is learning the right values and stuff that really has significant lifelong and eternal value, without question. And you kind of endlessly made that obvious to us as coaches, and then to players. And I think that was what made Madison Athletics exceptional. I think it was exceptional.
It was people that left Madison, and I say this not because I was there, but because with a lot of Jim Webb, Gary Walls, and those who had great experiences with coaches with us. But when they went out to other places, they came back and they said, the biggest mistake I ever made was leaving Madison, because of the close-knit family that we had. And I think that, I'd like to, there's a quote that I put in my book that I think is kind of fits all of this, is the too hot a pursuit of one goal or one truth may cause us to ignore other truths equally important. Daniel Webster said that during the debate in the 1850s over slavery. But I like to take it and change it to the too hot a pursuit of one goal in life may cause us to ignore other goals that are equally important.
Right.
And even more satisfying. It's like in my case, I was going to be the Major League Baseball player, buy my folks a home out of that bonus money. Never happened. But the other goal, the other truth came as a teacher. How could anybody experience what I've experienced and not feel humble and overly joyed over what transpired? You know, I say coaching is a career, teaching is a career that keeps on paying.
Yeah.
But over the years, I get a phone call, a card, and people saying, thank you for doing this. Thank you for, you know, a while back here, a guy called and he said, he hadn't talked to him for 50 years. And he said, you corrected me in the hall one day when I was being overly intimate with my girlfriend. And I remember those days. You know, faculty, we hated it. We didn't like to. Nobody likes to go out and say, hey, son, you dirty old man, what are you thinking about? Well, we were expected to break up fights and to stop this kind of activity. Anyway, I had tapped him on the shoulder and said, asked him a couple of questions. And anyway, he remembered the conversation word for word. And he calls me 50 years later and says, I want you to know how much pain you saved me.
Well,
you can't pay somebody.
no,
Money doesn't buy. You know, you're not going to make a lot of money teaching and coaching.
no.
But you're going to be satisfied and happy if you get those kinds of calls and have experiences like this.
Well, before we leave Madison AD, I just got to share one story, and it's a conversation that I've never forgotten. We had our Friday morning coaches' Bible studies. Now, this is a pretty unique environment in a public school setting, but we'd come over to your basement, and you'd always have, you know, one of the perks of your job is you were handing out free continental breakfast to your staff every Friday. But we had talked about something, and it got me worried about myself because I knew how competitive I was. I mean, and that too hot a pursuit of something, I was concerned that maybe I had too hot a pursuit of winning, and I needed to make sure that I kept things in priorities. And I asked you, is it wrong for me to want to be really successful as a baseball coach? And you say, not at all, as long as you're doing it for the glory of God and the betterment of others, not yourself. And that is the only explanation for me winning as many games as I won. Because I went to bed every night thinking, was I over-competitive? Did I do something wrong? Do I need to apologize to one of my kids? And that kind of always saying, I'm under the authority of God, and I need to make sure I'm treating all my kids with respect and treat them right. And it was a direct result of your answer. And stunningly enough, with all my foibles and weaknesses, that's the only way to explain how things were successful constantly. It's because I was trying to keep my priorities in order. And that's a direct result of your Friday mornings.
Those were fun. Thinking about those Friday morning things, people misunderstood that so much. I remember walking into school. The good thing was nobody on the coaching staff, at least I never heard of it, felt that they had to attend that in order to be accepted. If you wanted to do it, fine. If you didn't, that's fine. But I remember coming into school on a Monday morning and having a coach from another sport after we had lost a football game and say, your prayers didn't do any good last week, did they? And you want to grab them and say, no, that's not what we pray about.
No.
That's not what we're meeting about. We're not trying to get God on our side. I guess we say with Lincoln, the idea is to make sure we're on his side as far as the way we treat people, that nobody's being mistreated and abused, used as a commodity. But people didn't understand that.
Right.